Hidden beneath the sands of time lies a civilization so magnificent, its secrets still whisper to us today. Picture this: golden goblets etched with forgotten scripts, towering stone reliefs depicting kings who ruled with godlike authority, and intricate carvings that tell stories of empires stretching from the Nile to the Indus. This is ancient Persia, a world of staggering beauty and mystery, where every artifact unearthed is a puzzle piece waiting to be solved. What if I told you some of these objects hold clues to rituals so strange, so awe-inspiring, they defy modern explanation? The Persian Empire wasn't just powerful, it was a melting pot of cultures, a place where art, science, and ambition collided to create wonders that still leave historians speechless. Think about the sheer scale of it. Palaces adorned with glazed bricks in colors so vibrant they look freshly painted after 2,500 years. Silver coins stamped with the faces of rulers who commanded armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands. These aren't just relics, they're time capsules, offering us fleeting glimpses into the lives of people who walked these lands long before our modern world even existed. And here's the thing: the more we discover, the more we realize how much we've underestimated their brilliance. So today, we're going on a journey, a treasure hunt through 30 of the most intriguing artifacts ever pulled from Persia's ancient soil. Some will dazzle you with their craftsmanship, others will baffle you with their purpose, and a few might just send chills down your spine. Because behind each one lies a story of power, of devotion, of secrets meant to last forever. Who were the hands that shaped these objects? What messages did they leave buried for us to find? Strap in, we're about to peel back the layers of history, one astonishing discovery at a time. Among all the treasures of ancient Persia, none carries the weight of legacy quite like the Cyrus Cylinder. This humble clay object, no bigger than a loaf of bread, holds words that shook the foundations of history. Unearthed in 1879 among the ruins of Babylon, its surface is etched with lines of cuneiform script, wedge-shaped marks pressed into the clay over 2,500 years ago. But don't let its modest appearance fool you. This is the world's first known declaration of human rights, a radical idea for its time, etched by order of Cyrus the Great himself. Imagine a conqueror who didn't just take lands but won hearts. Unlike rulers who crushed the cultures they overpowered, Cyrus did the unthinkable. He set enslaved people free, restored temples, and allowed diverse communities to keep their traditions. The cylinder proclaims it plainly: no forced worship, no deportation of the defeated, no erasure of identity. In a world where victory usually meant brutality, Cyrus chose mercy. Modern scholars call it propaganda, but even if it was political theater, the impact was real. The exiled Jews returned to Jerusalem, Babylonian temples stood unharmed, and Persia became an empire held together not just by force but by loyalty. What's truly astonishing is how familiar its principles feel today. Freedom of belief, the right to dignity, justice for the oppressed, ideas we still struggle to uphold, were baked into this ancient clay. The cylinder even inspired symbols of modern liberty. Some say it influenced the founders of the United States, and a replica now sits in the United Nations as a testament to its enduring ideals. Yet for all its fame, mysteries linger. Was this purely Cyrus's vision or a pragmatic move to stabilize his growing empire? Why was it buried like a time capsule under Babylon's walls? Every scratch on its surface whispers questions, proving that even the most decoded artifacts keep their secrets close. Now let's shift our gaze to a discovery so dazzling, it seems plucked straight from a fable: the Oxus Treasure. Stumbled upon by villagers crossing a river in modern-day Tajikistan during the late 1800s, this hoard of gold and silver objects reads like a catalogue of Persian luxury. Picture delicate figurines of winged horses frozen mid-gallop, bracelets coiled like serpents with eyes of turquoise, and slender goblets so finely crafted they feel weightless in your hand. Each piece hums with the skill of artisans who understood metal as if it were clay, but here's where the mystery thickens. No one knows for certain why these treasures were buried. Some scholars argue they were offerings to a temple, perhaps left in gratitude to the river god Oxus himself. Others whisper of a panicked merchant fleeing invaders and burying his fortune with the hope of returning, a hope never fulfilled. The truth may never be settled, but the artifacts themselves tell their own tales. Take the famous model chariot pulled by 4 horses no larger than your thumb. Every detail, the driver's wrapped beard, the reins threaded through tiny rings, suggests it wasn't just art. It may have been a sacred object, a miniature echo of royal processions meant for the divine. What makes this treasure truly extraordinary, though, is its journey. After its chance discovery, pieces were scattered across continents, sold by local finders to traders who smuggled them through mountain passes. Many were rescued by a British officer who bartered with caravan leaders, while others vanished into private collections. Today, the surviving relics in the British Museum offer a fragmented poem of Persian life, where gods, kings, and ordinary people crossed paths in gold and fire. Were these objects prayers, bribes, or simply the excess of an empire that dripped wealth? Every gleaming surface seems to answer, and yet somehow keeps its silence. High on the face of a sheer limestone cliff in western Iran, where the wind howls through the Zagros Mountains, lies what might be history's most audacious press release. The Behistun Inscription isn't just carved into rock. It's etched 300 feet above the valley floor, a place so perilous that when British officer Henry Rawlinson scaled it in the 1830s, he reportedly used ropes and ladders while local villagers held their breaths below. This is Darius the Great's version of shouting from the rooftops, a declaration so monumental it was meant to be seen but never touched. The real magic of this towering text lies in its 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, each repeating the same thunderous message. Darius, freshly victorious in crushing rebellions after his controversial rise to power, used this cliff as his imperial billboard. He recounts battles, names traitors, and thanks the god Ahura for his victories, all while towering over the ancient highway below like a stone-faced overseer. But here's the twist. What began as royal propaganda became a linguistic skeleton key. Centuries later, scholars used these parallel texts to crack cuneiform's code, much like the Rosetta Stone did for Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's right, a king's boast became the dictionary that unlocked Mesopotamia's lost voices. Yet the inscription guards its own mysteries. Why choose such an inaccessible spot? Some say it was sacred ground, a place where heaven met earth. Others argue Darius wanted his words to outlast time itself, safe from vandals and the elements. And then there's the curious irony. The very permanence he sought almost backfired. For centuries, travelers mistook the tiny figures beneath the text, a bound rebel under Darius's foot, for a Christian crucifixion scene, weaving entirely new myths around his legacy. Today, the wind still carries whispers of the workers who dangled from ropes to chisel each line, their names lost while their kings echo into eternity. Walking through the ruins of Persepolis today, you can almost hear the rustle of silk and the murmur of a dozen languages. Towering above the remnants of the great palace are the Persepolis Reliefs, carefully carved scenes that turn stone into a theater of empire. These aren't just decorations, they're a carefully staged parade frozen in limestone, showing row upon row of ambassadors from every corner of the known world. Medes in their rounded hats, Elamites bearing lion cubs, Ethiopians clutching ivory tusks, all captured mid-stride, forever offering their treasures to the Persian king. Xerxes I, Darius's son, understood something crucial about power. It's not just about armies or taxes, but spectacle. These reliefs were his masterpiece of political theater. Imagine being a foreign envoy climbing the grand staircase, seeing your own people immortalized in stone alongside dozens of others. The message was unmistakable. Persia wasn't just ruling you, it celebrated you so long as you bowed to the throne. The genius lay in the details. No one looks defeated or fearful. Instead, there's a quiet dignity to the figures, as if their submission was voluntary, even honorable. That was the illusion Xerxes sold, that his empire wasn't a prison, but a grand alliance where every culture had its place. But peel back another layer, and the carvings revealed darker truths. Notice how the Persians themselves never appear in the tribute lines, only as overseers, standing just slightly taller than the rest. The reliefs subtly reinforced a hierarchy, with the king's subjects forever in motion while the Achaemenid elite stood serene. And then there's the odd absence of any military imagery. No battles, no prisoners, just an endless river of gifts. It's propaganda at its most sophisticated, erasing the violence of conquest with scenes of peaceful abundance. Archaeologists have spent decades decoding the hidden language of these carvings. The order of the delegations wasn't random. It mirrored Persia's geopolitical priorities, with key allies placed prominently. Even the carving's placement had meaning, positioned at eye level where dignitaries would wait, ensuring they'd absorb the message while shuffling toward the throne. Today, these reliefs are more than art. They're a fossilized psychology of empire, showing how a superpower sold itself to the world, and perhaps the most haunting thought. The artisans who carved them likely came from the very lands depicted, their hands shaping the very symbols of their own submission. Buried beneath the ashes of a fortress reduced to smoldering rubble lies one of Persia's most enigmatic treasures, the golden rhytons of Hasanlu. These aren't ordinary drinking vessels. Each one is a masterpiece of artistry, shaped into the snarling heads of griffins, lions, and mythical beasts, their hollow bodies arching like the necks of predators mid-lunge. Discovered in the ruins of a citadel in northwestern Iran, their gleam untouched by time, these rhytons whisper of a night when fire swallowed an entire city. The mystery begins with their craftsmanship, made from a single sheet of hammered gold so thin it shimmers like liquid. The rhytons curve into creatures both familiar and otherworldly. Some bear the twisted horns of ibexes, others the coiled manes of Assyrian-style lions, their eyes inlaid with lapis lazuli that still glints with an eerie, lifelike intensity. But why fashion a cup into something so ferocious? One theory suggests these were ritual objects, vessels for pouring offerings to gods who demanded grandeur, where wine might have flowed like sacrificial blood from the beast's gaping jaws. Archaeologists point to similar finds in temple complexes, where animal-shaped rhytons played roles in ceremonies honoring deities of fertility or war. Yet there's another tantalizing possibility. In a region where alliances shifted like desert sands, gifts of gold could buy loyalty or stave off invasion. Might these rhytons have been diplomatic bribes traded to warlords or neighboring kings? The presence of stylistic elements from Assyria, Urartu, and even distant Greece hints at a crossroads of cultures where drinking together from such cups could seal treaties or mask betrayals. But Hasanlu's true enigma is its destruction. Around 800 BC, someone or something reduced this thriving city to charcoal in a single cataclysmic night. Excavators found skeletons frozen in flight, their bones mingled with melted gold. Was it an invading army, a revolt? The rhytons, buried hastily beneath a collapsed ceiling, offer no answers. Only one clue lingers, the teeth marks on some vessels' rims, as if their last users bit down in terror or desperation. Today, these golden beasts stand as both artwork and omen, their beauty inseparable from the violence that preserved them. Deep in the caves of the Zagros Mountains, where the borders of ancient Elam and Persia blurred, craftsmen carved stories into tusks not with words, but with scenes so intricate they feel alive. The Eshkaft-e-Salmon ivories are a masterclass in cultural fusion, each panel no thicker than your finger yet bursting with details that defy their size. Imagine palm-sized panels depicting griffins with feathers precisely etched to catch the light, or banquet scenes where every figure's draped robe folds like real fabric. These weren't just decorations, they were diplomatic art, blending Mesopotamian mythology with Persian elegance to adorn the palaces of rulers who demanded nothing less than perfection. What makes these ivories extraordinary isn't just their beauty, it's their silent testimony to a world of elite opulence. Archaeologists believe they once embellished thrones, chests, or even chariot interiors, their luminous surfaces catching lamplight in rooms where kings negotiated with ambassadors. The motifs tell a tale of cross-border influence. Here a Babylonian demon borrowed from the Epic of Gilgamesh, there a Persian nobleman holding a lotus, a symbol of purity traced back to the Indus Valley. This was more than art, it was a visual language of power, whispering to visitors that the ruler who owned them commanded connections stretching across empires. Yet the most tantalizing question remains, whose hands carved them? The precision suggests workshops where master artisans, perhaps displaced from conquered lands, translated their traditions into a new visual dialect. Some panels bear tool marks so fine they'd require magnifying lenses, a technology not known in the region at the time. Were these craftsmen using loupe-like tools, or did their skill simply transcend what we thought possible? And why were fragments found tucked in caves rather than palaces? One theory hints at crisis treasures hastily hidden during invasions, their owners never returning to reclaim them. Others suggest ritual deposits, offerings to mountain spirits believed to guard the frontier. Today, these ivories exist as fragments of a lost aesthetic, where every curve of a tusk was a canvas for political storytelling. To touch one, if museums allowed it, would be to trace the fingerprints of artists whose names are lost, but whose legacy lingers in the way they turned ivory into a bridge between worlds. Their work whispers a truth we often forget. That luxury in ancient times wasn't just about wealth, it was about weaving the threads of diverse cultures into something entirely new, something only the most powerful could possess. In the rugged highlands of northwestern Iran, where the shadows of the Zagros Mountains stretch like grasping fingers, a shepherd's accidental stumble in 1946 unearthed a puzzle wrapped in gold and bronze, the Ziwiye Hoard. This wasn't just a collection of treasures, it was a cultural cacophony, a jumble of Scythian animal motifs, Assyrian deity figures, and Persian craftsmanship so fluid it defied borders. Picture a single chest holding a golden stag with antlers curled like vine tendrils, a silver belt stamped with Mesopotamian gods, and a dagger whose hilt bore the snarling face of a griffin, an artifact cocktail no museum could neatly categorize. The hoard's chaotic beauty sparks fierce debate among archaeologists. Was this a royal tomb's loot, buried with some forgotten king who fancied himself a collector of conquests? Or was it the panicked stash of a trader or warlord, hiding his wealth as armies clashed outside his walls? The evidence leans both ways. The sheer variety Elamite bracelets nestled beside Eurasian cauldrons suggests a deliberate assemblage, perhaps a ruler's tribute from vassal states. Yet the haphazard way some pieces were crammed together hints at urgency, as if someone tossed their valuables into a pit while smoke darkened the horizon. What's undeniable is how the Ziwiye Hoard mirrors Persia's identity as a cultural crossroads. A single gold armlet might feature Scythian-style leaping stags on one side and Assyrian pommets on the other, fused with Persian granulation so fine it looks like sprinkled stardust. This wasn't imitation, it was reinvention. Artisans weren't just copying neighbors, they were remixing traditions into something bold and new, a visual dialect that said, "We are all these things and none of them." But the hoard guards its secrets tightly. No inscriptions name its owner, no battle records mention its burial. Even the dating wavers between the 7th and 8th centuries BC, a blur of epochs when empires rose and fell like theater curtains. Some scholars whisper of the Medes, Persia's shadowy precursors, as possible patrons. Others point to the Scythians, nomadic horsemen who swept through like storms, leaving gold in their wake. Perhaps the most haunting clue is a shattered silver mask, its features smoothed into anonymity. Was this a king's death face or a deity's visage meant to ward off evil? We may never know, but every fragmented object in the Ziwiye Hoard whispers the same truth. In ancient Persia, beauty was never just one thing. It was a conversation across civilizations, etched in metal and left for us to decode. Scattered across battlefields and royal armories, the Achaemenid armor scales are a testament to warfare turned into spectacle. These weren't just functional pieces. Each one, no larger than a thumbnail, was a miniature work of art. Crafted from gold or bronze so thin it could flex with a warrior's movement, they were punched with tiny holes and stitched onto leather or linen in overlapping rows, creating a surface that caught sunlight like fish scales in a rushing stream. Imagine 10,000 soldiers clad in this shimmering mosaic, advancing under the Persian sun, not just an army, but a moving constellation of reflected light. Herodotus famously described the empire's elite Immortals unit, their ranks perpetually maintained at exactly 10,000, as a force that glittered with gold. Reading his accounts, it's easy to picture these scales in action, how they would have rippled with every step, their metallic whisper unnerving enemies before a single arrow was loosed. But here's what the Greek historian missed: the psychology behind their design. This wasn't just about intimidation. The scale's delicate construction, light enough for mobility yet dense enough to deflect glancing blows, reveals a culture that valued both practicality and theater. Achaemenid warriors didn't just fight, they performed, their armor signaling wealth, divine favor, and the empire's inexhaustible resources. Modern reconstructions show how these scales created an optical illusion on the battlefield. Up close, each piece bore intricate stamping, geometric patterns, or miniature rosettes visible only to those who got dangerously near. Yet from a distance, the collective effect was hypnotic, a shimmering wave that made troop movements appear fluid, almost supernatural. Archaeologists have even found traces of pigment between scales, suggesting some were backed with colored fabrics, turning soldiers into walking tapestries of imperial power. But the real genius lies in their modularity. Unlike rigid bronze cuirasses worn by Greek hoplites, these scales allowed for repairs. Individual pieces could be replaced after skirmishes without scrapping entire suits. Some recovered scales show minute differences in alloy mixtures, hinting at decentralized workshops across the empire, all producing to the same exacting standard. And then there's the haunting detail. Many scales excavated from battle sites bear tiny nicks and gashes, each one a frozen moment where gold met steel and a soldier's fate hung in the balance. Perhaps most intriguing is how these artifacts blur the line between armor and identity. For the Immortals, replacing fallen comrades to maintain their legendary number, the scales were a uniform in the truest sense, erasing individuality to forge a single, undying instrument of war. Yet for high-ranking officers, scales were sometimes inscribed with prayers to Ahura Mazda or clan symbols, transforming protection into personal devotion. Today, these fragile remnants challenge our assumptions about ancient warfare, where survival and symbolism were woven together, one gleaming scale at a time. Standing silent and steadfast in the ruins of Pasargadae, the stone plinths that once upheld Cyrus the Great's palaces tell a story of innovation wrapped in mystery. These massive limestone blocks, each meticulously carved with strange, precise grooves and slots, look almost like the pieces of some colossal puzzle forgotten by time. At first glance, they seem purely functional foundations meant to anchor towering columns and expansive halls, but look closer and the questions begin. Why would builders go to such lengths to create interlocking channels in stones meant to be buried beneath the earth? The leading theory suggests these plinths were an ancient answer to a very modern problem: earthquakes. Persia's heartland sits atop restless tectonic plates, and Cyrus's architects may have designed these grooves as shock absorbers, allowing the stones to shift subtly during tremors without collapsing. Imagine the foresight centuries before engineers coined terms like seismic resilience. These craftsmen were already dispersing seismic energy through carefully placed gaps. Some scholars point to similar techniques in later Persian structures, where wooden inserts acted as flexible buffers between stones, further supporting the idea that this was deliberate anti-earthquake engineering. Yet there's another, more tantalizing possibility. The grooves align with Zoroastrian symbolism, a faith deeply woven into Persian identity. The slots might represent the chinvat, the bridge between the material and spiritual worlds in Zoroastrian belief, a literal and metaphysical foundation connecting earthly power to divine order. The precise angles and depths could mirror celestial patterns, embedding sacred geometry into the very bones of the empire's first capital. After all, Pasargadae wasn't just a political seat. It was Cyrus's vision of a cosmic harmony where architecture mirrored the universe's balance. Modern laser scans reveal something even more intriguing. The grooves aren't uniform. Some are deeper, others wider, as if tailored to specific stones or locations within the palace complex. Was this a code, a hidden system of classification known only to the builders, or perhaps a way to tune the stones like instruments to resonate with certain frequencies during rituals? The plinths near the tomb of Cyrus, for instance, feature a unique crosshatch pattern unseen elsewhere, hinting at a special function tied to the king's eternal rest. Archaeologists have tried replicating the plinth's design with 3D models, testing both structural and symbolic theories. The results are provocative. The grooves do indeed mitigate lateral forces, but they also create audible harmonics when wind passes through them at certain speeds, a phenomenon that might have been interpreted as the whispers of divine beings. It's a reminder that in ancient Persia, the line between engineering and spirituality was often blurred. These stones weren't just meant to hold up walls, they were meant to bridge worlds both seen and unseen. And so the plinths endure, their secrets locked in limestone. Were they Cyrus's pragmatic solution to a shaking earth, or a king's attempt to etch his piety into the land itself? The truth might lie somewhere in between, proof that even the most grounded elements of his empire were built with one foot in the heavens. Among the sun-baked ruins of Susa, where the echoes of Darius the Great's empire still linger, there's a sight that stops archaeologists mid-step, walls that refuse to fade. The glazed brick friezes of Susa aren't just remnants of a palace. They're explosions of color frozen in time, their cobalt blues and sunflower yellows as vivid today as when they first emerged from the kiln over 2,500 years ago. Picture a procession of golden lions, their manes rippling like flames, pacing alongside ranks of Persian archers whose bows seem forever taut with tension. This isn't mere decoration, it's a calculated display of imperial power, engineered to dazzle allies and intimidate rivals. What makes these bricks extraordinary isn't just their artistry, but the alchemy behind them. Persian craftsmen didn't simply paint these scenes, they baked them into existence layer by layer. The process was a symphony of precision, quartz crushed to powder, mixed with plant ash and metallic oxides, then fired at temperatures so exact that a single degree's shift could turn royal blue into murky sludge. Each brick was a gamble. Shrink too much in the kiln, and the pattern would fracture; too little, and the glaze wouldn't bond. Yet somehow, across thousands of bricks, the artisans achieved near-perfect uniformity, their hands guided by secrets modern potters still struggle to replicate. The secret to their brilliance: Babylon. When Cyrus conquered Mesopotamia, he didn't just claim its wealth, he absorbed its knowledge. Babylonian glaze recipes, honed over centuries, became the foundation for Susa's palette. The iconic lapis, like blue, for instance, relied on cobalt oxide imported from distant mines, a luxury only an empire with Persia's reach could afford. But here's where the Persians outdid their teachers. Where Babylonian bricks often featured repetitive motifs, Susa's panels burst with narrative. archers in tiered crowns marching beside mythological beasts, their individuality captured in subtle variations of posture and dress. This was propaganda in polychrome, a way of saying, "We've mastered your craft and now we're rewriting its language. Look closer," and the bricks reveal even smarter tricks. The archers' uniforms aren't just colorful, they're color-coded. Ranks were distinguished by the intensity of their yellow sashes or the patterning on their quivers, a visual hierarchy instantly recognizable to any viewer. And those lions, their golden hues shift slightly across the frieze, creating an illusion of movement when sunlight tracked the palace walls throughout the day. Some scholars argue this was intentional, a way to make the king's symbolic protectors seem alive, their eyes following visitors like sentinels. Yet for all their technical triumph, the bricks guard one last mystery. When French archaeologists unearthed them in the 1800s, many were found stacked neatly in courtyards, not collapsed from walls as expected. Were they carefully disassembled for reuse or hidden from some forgotten threat? The answer may lie in the clays themselves. Recent spectral analysis shows traces of tamarisk sap in the glaze, a plant resin known to repel insects. Were these masterpieces not just art but a form of sacred pest control, their shimmering surfaces meant to ward off plagues as much as enemy glances? Today, the Susa friezes stand as a testament to Persia's greatest strength, its ability to borrow, refine, and surpass. They remind us that empires aren't just built on battlefields, but in kilns where fire transforms mud into immortality. And perhaps that's the most striking lesson, that a civilization's true colors are revealed not in how it wages war, but in how it bakes its bricks. In the arid valleys of southeastern Persia, where the Halul River cuts through dusty plains, laborers digging an irrigation ditch in the year 2000 uncovered something extraordinary: dozens of chlorite vessels, each carved with scenes so intricate they seemed to pulse with life. These weren't just storage jars, they were canvases of dark green stone, etched with serpents coiling around sacred trees, horned giants wrestling bulls, and temples crowned with symbols no modern scholar could fully decipher. The Jiroft vessels, as they came to be known, ignited a firestorm in archaeology. Some hailed them as proof of a glittering, lost civilization predating even Sumer, while others dismissed them as beautiful anomalies, products of trade, not a forgotten empire. The controversy hinges on one electrifying claim: that Jiroft was the heartland of Aratta, a legendary kingdom mentioned in Mesopotamian myths as a land of unimaginable wealth and craftsmanship. Proponents point to the vessel's sheer volume, over 2,000 pieces recovered from looted graves and official excavations, as evidence of a centralized workshop culture, the kind that could only thrive under a powerful, organized state. The motifs only deepen the mystery. Many carvings depict creatures unknown to Mesopotamian art, like scorpion-tailed eagles or humanoids with crescent moon headdresses, hinting at a unique religious lexicon. Then there's the chlorite itself, quarried from local mountains, suggesting the artisans weren't importing materials but mastering their own landscape. But skeptics raise compelling counter-arguments. If Jiroft was so mighty, where are its palaces, its written records, the clay tablets that accompanied every other Bronze Age power? The vessel's iconography, while striking, shares uncanny similarities with contemporaneous Elamite and Sumerian art, the intertwined snakes echoing Ningishzida, the Mesopotamian god of vegetation, or the temple facades mirroring ziggurat designs. Could these instead be the work of borderland craftsmen, adept at blending influences for export? Chemical analysis muddies the waters further. While some vessels contain traces of local minerals, others bear pigments traceable to Afghanistan's lapis lazuli mines or the Persian Gulf's copper deposits, painting a picture of far-flung trade networks rather than an insular culture. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the ruins of Konar Sandal, a massive stepped platform unearthed near the find sites. Is this the foundation of a Jiroft palace or merely a ceremonial center? The structure's layout echoes Mesopotamian temples, yet its brickwork techniques are wholly unique. For every piece of evidence, there's a counterpoint. Carbon dating places some artifacts as old as 2500 BC, contemporary with Ur's Golden Age, but no cuneiform tablets mention Jiroft by name. Even the vessel's purpose is debated. Were they funerary offerings, diplomatic gifts, or sacred objects traded along the lapis route that connected Afghanistan to the Mediterranean? What's undeniable is the mastery behind these carvings. Using nothing but stone tools, artisans achieved shadow effects by varying groove depths, making figures seem to emerge from the chlorite like ghosts. Some scenes form continuous narratives when vessels are aligned in sequence, suggesting they were meant to be read as a set. And then there are the haunting absences. No depictions of warfare, no obvious royalty, just an obsession with nature and the divine. Was Jiroft a peaceful theocracy, or have we simply failed to decode its violence? The truth may lie in the cracks, literally. Many vessels show deliberate breaks, carefully repaired with bitumen in antiquity. This wasn't carelessness, it was ritual. In Mesopotamian tradition, mending sacred objects symbolized renewal, a cycle of death and rebirth. If Jiroft's artisans shared this belief, their work wasn't just art, it was theology in stone. Today, as debates rage, one thing is clear: these vessels refuse to be pigeonholed. They're neither purely Persian nor wholly Mesopotamian, but something in between, a testament to the fluidity of ancient identity, where cultures didn't collide so much as converse. And perhaps that's the real discovery, not a lost civilization, but a reminder that the past was never as neatly divided as our textbooks suggest. Tucked into the bustling streets of Hamadan, where the scent of saffron and cumin drifts through ancient alleyways, stands a structure that defies time, the tomb of Esther and Mordecai. This modest brick shrine, with its turquoise-tiled dome and Hebrew inscriptions, isn't just a relic. It's a living testament to an extraordinary alliance between Persian kings and Jewish exiles. Step inside and you'll find two ornate sarcophagi draped in embroidered cloth, said to hold the remains of the legendary Queen Esther and her uncle Mordecai, heroes of the Purim story who saved Persia's Jews from annihilation. But peel back the layers of devotion, and the tomb reveals a far richer tapestry, one where history and faith intertwine like the vines carved into its walls. The legend is etched into Jewish memory. Esther, the Jewish queen who concealed her identity until the moment she revealed it to King Xerxes, thwarting his vizier Haman's plot to exterminate her people. The biblical book of Esther paints Persia as both a land of existential threat and miraculous deliverance, yet here's where the tomb complicates the tale. While Jewish tradition venerates this site, scholars note striking gaps. The structure's architecture is distinctly Ilkhanid, dating to the 14th century, far later than Esther's lifetime. No contemporary Achaemenid records mention her, and Hamadan itself wasn't even a capital in Xerxes' era. So why has this spot been revered for centuries? The answer lies in Persia's unique relationship with its Jewish community. Long after Esther's era under the Sassanian Empire, Hamadan became a thriving Jewish hub. The tomb likely gained prominence as a symbol of resilience during times of persecution. Persian Jews, facing waves of instability, anchored their identity to this tangible link with their past. Over time, the site absorbed local traditions too. Notice the Islamic-style calligraphy alongside Hebrew prayers, or the Zoroastrian-inspired floral motifs framing the entrance. This wasn't cultural appropriation, it was coexistence, a silent dialogue of reverence transcending religious lines. Even the doubting scholars can't dismiss the tomb's emotional power. For generations, Jewish pilgrims have pressed notes into its walls, prayers whispered for miracles. Iranian Muslims, too, pay respects, some calling Esther Hadassah, her Hebrew name, as they light candles. In a region often fractured by conflict, the tomb stands as rare common ground. But the greatest mystery isn't whether Esther lies here. it's how her story, real or embroidered, became a lifeline. Perhaps the tomb's true magic is its ability to hold two truths at once, a monument to a possibly mythical queen, and a very real sanctuary where faiths touch fingertips across the centuries. Whether history or legend, that's a legacy no excavation can fully uncover. By the late 19th century, Europe was gripped by Persian fever. Collectors and museums clamored for artifacts from the ancient empire, willing to pay fortunes for a sliver of its glory. Enter the Qajar-era forgers, masterful artisans who turned deception into an art form. Among their most infamous creations was the so-called Cyrus seal, a lapis lazuli cylinder seal purportedly etched with the great king's insignia. To the untrained eye, it was flawless, the cuneiform script crisp, the royal motifs regal, the stone's patina perfectly aged. Even seasoned scholars were fooled, hailing it as a lost treasure, until modern science tore the facade apart. X-ray fluorescence scans revealed the truth. The seal's vibrant blue came not from ancient Afghan lapis, but from synthetic dyes unavailable before the 1800s. The cuneiform, though expertly copied from authentic inscriptions, contained subtle anachronisms, phrases arranged in a style Cyrus's scribes never used. Most damning of all, microscopic tool marks betrayed the use of steel engravers, a technology millennia ahead of the Achaemenid period. This wasn't just a fake, it was a time traveler's mistake, a masterpiece of misplaced precision. The forgers' motives were as layered as their deceptions. Some were likely court artisans, their skills honed in Qajar workshops now repurposed to exploit European hunger for relics. Others may have been antiquities dealers, stitching together fragments of genuine artifacts with invented elements to create complete pieces. The Cyrus seal, for instance, borrowed motifs from authentic Persepolis reliefs, but mashed them into compositions that would have baffled ancient eyes. These weren't crude scams, they were cultural collages, blending just enough truth to seduce the desperate. Today, these forgeries linger in museum basements and auction catalogs, still muddying the waters. High-resolution spectroscopy can now spot anachronistic minerals or adhesives, but many fakes evade detection simply because they're too beautiful to question. Take the Darius dagger, long displayed as a Achaemenid ceremonial weapon. Only recently did conservators notice its hilt's gold filigree used a wire-twisting technique perfected in Mughal India 2,000 years too late. Why does this matter beyond embarrassing a few collectors? Because every forgery that slips into the record distorts our understanding of history. A single fake seal can spawn theories about trade routes that never existed, or diplomatic ties between kingdoms that never met. The Qajar forgeries remind us that the past is always vulnerable to the passions of the present, and that sometimes the most authentic artifacts are the ones that never were. In the shadow of the crumbling columns at Kangavar, where the ruins of a grand temple complex rise from the earth, archaeologists unearthed treasures that shimmer with devotion, silver figurines of Anahita, the Persian goddess of waters, fertility, and war. These votive offerings, no taller than a hand span, depict her with arms outstretched as if blessing the rivers below, her robes etched with intricate waves and her crown shaped like the crescent moon. But what's truly fascinating isn't just their beauty, it's the paradox they represent. How did a goddess worshipped long before Zoroastrianism's rise become a central figure in Sassanian Persia, an empire that claimed to follow Ahura Mazda's singular light? The answer lies in the Sassanian king's political genius. Anahita's cult, rooted in ancient Indo-Iranian reverence for life-giving waters, was too powerful to erase. Instead, they folded her into Zoroastrianism as a Yazata, a divine worthy of veneration. Temple sites like Kangavar became stages for this theological balancing act. Here, priests conducted rituals where Anahita's silver effigies were bathed in spring water, a symbolic fusion of her primal power and Zoroastrian purity rites. The figurines themselves tell this story. Some bear dual inscriptions invoking both Anahita and Ahura Mazda, their scripts overlapping like converging streams. Yet the worship wasn't just spiritual theater. Anahita's prominence reflected Sassanian realpolitik. Her association with royal legitimacy made her a favorite of kings like Shapur I, who minted coins showing her crowning him, a divine endorsement of his rule. Farmers left offerings at her shrines during droughts, soldiers carried her likeness into battle, and women prayed to her figurines for fertility, their fingertips wearing smooth the silver over generations. This was religion as lived experience, adaptable and personal. The Ziwiye Hoard reveals another layer, syncretism. Some figurines show Anahita holding a pomegranate, a symbol borrowed from Near Eastern goddesses like Ishtar. Others feature Hellenistic drapery, evidence of Persia's cultural exchanges. Even the temple's architecture blends Zoroastrian fire altar layouts with classical columned halls, a stone and mortar metaphor for how faiths intertwine. Today, these silver offerings pose a tantalizing question. Were they acts of piety, political tools, or both? Their worn surfaces, polished by countless touches, suggest an answer. In ancient Persia, the sacred and the sovereign were never truly separate. Rising from the dry plains of Fars province, the Savastan Palace stands as a silent revolution in stone, a Sassanian puzzle where every arch whispers of architectural rebellion. Unlike the towering ruins of Persepolis or the intricate mosaics of Ctesiphon, this compact structure doesn't dazzle with ornamentation. Instead, it stuns with audacious geometry. A central dome floating atop squinches those clever triangular corners that bridge square rooms to round ceilings, and arches so precise they seem drawn by celestial compasses. Built in the 5th century, likely under King Bahram V, the Hunter King of legend, its purpose is hotly debated. Was it a royal retreat where nobles feasted after chasing gazelles across the salt flats? A secluded fire temple where Zoroastrian priests tended sacred flames? The truth may lie in the walls themselves. Walk through its vaulted corridors and you'll notice something extraordinary. These aren't just support structures, they're experiments. The builders stacked brick upon brick without wooden scaffolding, using a herringbone pattern that redistributed weight like interlocking fingers. This technique, revolutionary for its time, would later become a hallmark of Islamic mosques from Isfahan to Istanbul. Look up at the dome's interior. The plaster isn't smooth but textured with zigzag grooves, an early acoustic innovation to amplify chants or conversations. Even the palace's orientation is a marvel of proto-science. Windows align with seasonal winds, funneling cool drafts in summer while trapping warmth in winter. A passive climate control system carved from sandstone and intuition. Yet the most tantalizing clue to Savastan's identity hides in its shadows. Beneath the main hall, archaeologists found a sunken chamber with an odd feature, a shallow basin lined with bitumen, a tar-like waterproofing. Some theorize this was a sacred pool for ritual ablutions, linking the site to Anahita worship. Others point to soot marks on the ceiling, suggesting a fire altar. But here's the twist: the palace lacks living quarters. No kitchens, no bedrooms, just vast, echoing spaces perfect for processions or prayer. This ambiguity is precisely what makes Savastan so groundbreaking. It refuses to fit neatly into categories, just as Sassanian Persia itself defied simple labels, neither purely imperial nor entirely sacred, but a laboratory where both worlds collided. The legacy of these experiments stretches far beyond Persia's borders. That dome on Squinch's design, it would evolve into the Hagia Sophia's grandeur. The pointed arches, blueprints for Gothic cathedrals centuries later. Even the palace's modular layout, where spaces flow seamlessly rather than following rigid axial plans, feels eerily modern. Some scholars argue Savastan wasn't just a building but a manifesto, a Sassanian declaration that architecture could shape human experience as profoundly as laws or wars. And perhaps that's why it still stands not as a ruin but as a challenge. daring us to see the ancient world not through texts or treasures, but through the spaces they dared to imagine. Perched high above the lush valleys near Hamadan, where the Alvand Mountains cut a jagged silhouette against the sky, two massive stone panels bear the boasts of kings who ruled when the world was young. The Ganjnaime inscriptions aren't just carvings, they're frozen voices from the 5th century BC, shouting across millennia in stark, unapologetic cuneiform. The message is simple, repeated twice in 3 languages: "I am Darius, the great king," and "I am Xerxes, the great king," followed by laundry lists of conquests and divine endorsements. But between these ancient lines of power, a far more human story unfolds, one of ego clashing with ego across 25 centuries. The king's words were meant to awe. Darius's panel, carved first, declares him ruler of lands stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, his authority blessed by Ahurmazda. Xerxes, his son, later added his own slab nearly identical in phrasing but subtly one-upping his father. His list of territories includes mysterious lands scholars still debate, possibly hinting at expansions even historians forgot. The choice of location was no accident. This wasn't just a remote cliff, it overlooked the ancient royal road where caravans and diplomats would have craned their necks to see the looming reminders of who held ultimate power. The inscriptions functioned like a billboard for empire, their sheer size, each panel over 2 meters tall, making them impossible to ignore. Yet the real drama lies in the graffiti. Centuries after the Achaemenids fell, European explorers arrived, their names now crudely scratched beside the king's pronouncements. Victorian adventurer Sir Henry Rawlinson, who later deciphered cuneiform, reportedly carved his initials here during his travels in the 1830s. Other 19th century visitors left dates and surnames in looping Latin script, some even using metal tools to deepen their marks, as if etching their own fleeting moment into permanence beside kings who'd once claimed eternity. It's a startling contrast, the original texts, precise and monumental, flanked by the haphazard scribbles of travelers who couldn't resist adding their own footnote to history. Modern laser scans reveal something poignant beneath the vandalism. The original carvers left guidelines, barely visible scoring lines to keep the cuneiform symbols perfectly aligned, proof of workmanship meant to last. The later graffiti, by comparison, looks frantic, almost desperate, as if those who added it knew their marks would never carry the weight of empires. Today, protective barriers keep new hands at bay, but the juxtaposition remains. 2 kings who reshaped continents, their words now sharing space with the scratches of tourists long turned to dust. The Ganjnaime stones don't just declare power, they expose the universal hunger to be remembered, whether through conquest or a pocketknife's grooves in rock. Perhaps the most ironic twist, those 19th century defacers unwittingly ensured the inscription's survival. Their vandalism drew global attention to the site, spurring preservation efforts that might not have happened had the panels remained pristine and overlooked. In a way, the kings got the last laugh. Their boasts, though scarred, still dominate the stone, while the interlopers' names fade into curiosities, footnotes to a proclamation that outshone them all. Beneath the earth of northwestern Iran, where the Cherabad salt mine cuts through layers of ancient sediment, workers in 1993 stumbled upon a site that seemed to defy time. A man's leg protruding from the salt wall, his leather boot still clinging to his foot as if he'd taken his final step just moments before. This was the first of the so-called salt men of Zanjan, a group of remarkably preserved mummies dating back to the Sassanian era, their bodies freeze-dried by the mine's antiseptic embrace. Unlike Egyptian mummies carefully prepared for eternity, these men were accidental time capsules, their skin, hair, and even the contents of their stomachs crystallized by the very environment that killed them. The boot alone is a revelation, a sturdy, knee-high design stitched with rawhide laces, its sole worn thin from trudging through salt tunnels. Archaeologists note its similarities to footwear worn by Scythian nomads, hinting at cultural exchanges between Persia and the steppes. But it's the miner's toolkit that paints the grimmest portrait: a wooden shovel with hand-carved grip marks, a woven basket lined with bitumen to prevent salt erosion, and a crude iron pick whose handle snapped mid-swing, preserved in the exact position it fell. These aren't just artifacts, they're frozen moments of labor interrupted. Forensic analysis reveals even darker details. One salt man's skull bears a crushing fracture, likely from a cave-in. Another's lungs are packed with salt dust, evidence of years spent breathing lethal particulates. Their last meals traces of leeks, barley, and a fermented dairy product akin to yogurt suggest they weren't slaves but skilled workers fed enough to sustain brutal shifts. The mine was no makeshift operation. It was a state-run enterprise, its output fueling Persia's economy as salt traded like currency. Yet the most haunting discovery lies in the fabric of their clothing. Woolen tunics dyed with madder root for a rusty red hue show meticulous repairs patches stitched with horsehair thread, elbows reinforced with extra layers. These weren't disposable garments, they were cared for, suggesting the miners had families waiting above ground. One mummy clutches a walnut in his clenched hand, perhaps a snack or a talisman against the darkness. The salt men's preservation is so complete that scientists extracted intact brain tissue from one, its proteins offering clues to ancient diets, but their value isn't just scientific. They're a rare window into the anonymous millions who built empires with their hands, their stories usually erased by time. Here, the salt played a cruel joke. It stole their lives but gave their struggles immortality. Walking through the Zanjan Museum where they now rest, you can't help but wonder, did they curse the mine that trapped them or thank it for ensuring they'd never be forgotten? Carved into the living rock of the Zagros Mountains, the Behistun Reliefs are a Sassanian billboard of power, piety, and artistry where kings and gods share the same stone stage. Step into the shaded alcoves near modern Kermanshah, and you're greeted by larger-than-life scenes of royal grandeur. Khosrow Roman II, the last great Sassanian emperor, astride his armored warhorse, bow drawn as deer flee before him in frozen terror. The king's armor alone is a masterpiece of detailed storytelling, overlapping metal plates, rendered with such precision you can almost hear them clink. His helmet crowned with a crescent moon echoing the Zoroastrian divine. But look closer and the real shocker emerges. Tucked beside his leg, a musician strums what appears to be the earliest known depiction of a guitar-like instrument, its curved body and strings etched with startling clarity. This isn't just a hunting scene, it's a symphony of symbolism. The stag Khosrow hunts isn't merely prey. Its collapsing form mirrors the downfall of his enemies, a visual metaphor hammered into rock for all to see. Behind him, attendants hold a parasol and fly whisk, markers of sovereignty borrowed from Indian courts, proof that Sassanian kings saw themselves as global players, not just Persian rulers. Even the horse's trappings whisper of empire, with tassels and medallions styled after Central Asian designs. But that mysterious instrument steals the show. Scholars debate whether it's a barbat, the ancestor of the lute, or an early tambur, but one thing's certain. This carving rewrites the history of music, placing Persia at the birth of stringed instruments that would later echo through Baghdad's courtyards and Andalusia's palaces. The smaller adjoining relief, often overshadowed, holds its own intrigue. Here, Ardashir Roman II receives his crown from Ahura Mazda himself, except the gods handing it over with Mithra, the sun deity, standing witness. This triad was radical theology. By including Mithra, a holdover from pre-Zoroastrian times, the Sassanians bridged old and new faiths, a diplomatic move to unite diverse worshippers under their rule. Notice how Ahura Mazda's foot rests atop a defeated Roman emperor's head, while Ardashir grips a sword, spiritual and earthly power fused in one image. What makes Behistun revolutionary isn't just its artistry, but its defiance of time. Unlike painted murals that fade, these carvings were meant to endure. their shadows lengthening with the sunset like a dial counting the empire's immortality. The pigment traces still visible crimson in the horses' harnesses, azure in the king's cape hint at a riot of color now lost to centuries of wind. Yet the stones guard one final secret. Hidden channels above the reliefs once funneled rainwater away, a clever preservation trick that kept the king's faces erosion-free. Today, as visitors trace the grooves of Khosrow's bowstring or the strings of that ancient guitar, they're touching the same lines carved by artisans who believed their work would outlast the stars, and so far they've been right. Buried beneath the ruins of Persepolis, where kings once held court in marble halls, archaeologists uncovered a treasure far less glamorous than golden rhytons or jeweled daggers, yet infinitely more revealing. The Persepolis fortification tablets are a mountain of bureaucratic minutiae, over 30,000 clay receipts documenting everything from temple offerings to the daily beer rations of construction crews. These aren't the grand proclamations of emperors, they're the paper trail of an empire's beating heart, recording the flour sacks, livestock, and honey jars that fueled history's first superpower. Take one tablet at random, and you might find a scribe's notation from 500 BC. 20 quarts of barley beer issued to Udana, the Elamite foreman, for his team of canal diggers. Another records a payment of silver to a woman named Erdabama for supplying sheep to the royal kitchens. Every pinch of salt, every brick delivered, every day's wage, all meticulously logged in Elamite cuneiform, the empire's administrative lingua franca. This was ancient Persia's version of an HR department, operating with a precision that would make modern corporations blush. What makes these tablets revolutionary isn't just their volume, but their intimacy. They reveal a society where workers from Babylonian bakers to Greek stonemasons were compensated fairly and regularly, their rations adjusted for job difficulty. Laborers hauling stone blocks received double the beer allotment of those weaving textiles, a rudimentary hazard pay system. Women appear frequently as landowners and merchants, their transactions recorded without fanfare, suggesting a level of economic agency rare in the ancient world. Even the gods got itemized receipts. One tablet lists 30 lambs, 2 bulls, and 100 loaves, destined for the altar of Ahura Mazda, with a clerk's note confirming the offering was received by the priest at sunset. The logistics behind this system boggle the mind. Scribes worked in triplicate, keeping copies in regional offices while the originals went to Persepolis. Taxes were calculated not just in grain or coin, but in labor hours. A village might owe 10 days' work per family to maintain royal roads. And here's the kicker. Many tablets bear fingerprints in the clay, pressed there intentionally as signatures by illiterate workers who couldn't write their names. These smudges are perhaps the most haunting relics of all, the literal touch of ordinary people who built an empire one brick, one beer jug at a time. Yet the tablets also hint at a darker undercurrent. Some entries reference dumb workers, likely war captives or indentured laborers who received smaller rations. Others note deductions for tools lost or projects delayed, proving even ancient bureaucrats had their red tape. But on balance, the records paint a picture of startling equity. When Darius Roman III fled Alexander's advancing army, his treasury held less gold than expected because Persia's wealth wasn't hoarded in vaults, but circulating through the hands of the people who earned it. Today, these unassuming clay lumps are rewriting history. By cross-referencing names across tablets, scholars have reconstructed family trees spanning generations. The beer recipes, thick, porridge-like brews flavored with dates, have even been recreated by craft breweries. But the real revelation is how they redefine Persian power. This wasn't just an empire held together by spears and fear. It ran on trust, accountability, and the radical notion that even the humblest worker's loaf of bread was worth recording for eternity. Legend speaks of a banner so magnificent, it inspired rebellions, the Deraft Kaviani, a jewel-studded standard said to have sparked the downfall of tyrants. According to Persian epic poet Ferdowsi, this wasn't just a flag, it was a revolution stitched onto leather, born when the blacksmith Kaveh rebelled against the monstrous ruler Zahak. The story goes that Kaveh, fed up with the king's serpent-infested shoulders demanding daily human sacrifices, tore off his leather apron and raised it on a spear as a rallying cry. Over time, that humble apron transformed into a legendary banner adorned with silk, gold, and rubies, carried by generations of kings as a symbol of resistance. But here's the twist: no physical remnant of the Derafsh Kaviani has ever been found. Did it truly glitter in the sunlight, or was it a myth spun to unite a nation? Clues about its appearance come tantalizingly close to reality. Sassanian coins minted centuries later show standards with trailing ribbons and crescent motifs, possibly echoing the Kaviani's design. Arab historians like Tabari describe Persian banners so heavy with gemstones they required carts to transport them. Could one have been the legendary flag? Even Alexander the Great's chroniclers mention seizing a dazzling Persian standard after defeating Darius Roman III, though they don't name it. The discrepancies pile up. Some texts claim the banner stretched the length of 5 men. Others say it bore the image of a mythical bird. What's consistent is its power as propaganda. When the Sassanians revived the Kaviani legend during their wars with Rome, they weren't just waving cloth, they were brandishing an idea that Persia's soul could never be crushed, no matter the invader. The banner's afterlife is equally fascinating. After the Arab conquest, stories say the Derafsh Kaviani was torn apart, its jewels looted and fragments dispersed, an apt metaphor for Persia's fractured identity. Yet its legacy endured. During the 1979 revolution, protesters carried makeshift versions as a rebuke to the monarchy, proving that symbols, even mythical ones, can outlast empires. Modern reconstructions in museums, pieced together from textual hints, shimmer with speculative artistry. They raise a provocative question: does it matter if the original Derafsh Kaviani was real when its story alone rallied armies and toppled kings? Sometimes the most powerful artifacts aren't the ones we can hold, but the ones we hold in our minds. Buried in the ashes of Shah-e-Sukhteh, the burnt city that once thrived on Persia's eastern edge, archaeologists uncovered a gaze frozen in time, the world's oldest known prosthetic eye. Nestled in the skeletal socket of a woman who lived 4,800 years ago, this hemispherical orb, barely larger than a $50, wasn't just a crude placeholder. Fashioned from lightweight tar mixed with animal fat and delicately painted with a radial golden iris and fine capillary lines to mimic veins, it's a masterpiece of ancient medical art. But here's what stuns researchers: the prosthetic shows signs of wear, its surface polished smooth from years of use. This wasn't a death mask ornament, it was worn by a living woman, perhaps for decades, long enough for the socket to develop abrasions from its movement. How did artisans without magnifying lenses or modern tools achieve such anatomical precision? The answer lies in the burnt city's other surprises. This was no backwater settlement but a hub of innovation, where surgeons performed early cataract operations and dentists drilled teeth to relieve abscesses. The eye's composition reveals a sophisticated understanding of biocompatibility. The tar mixture was gentle enough not to irritate living tissue, yet durable enough to withstand daily wear. Microscopic analysis shows the iris was painted with gold powder derived from nearby riverbeds, while the veins were traced with threads of lapis lazuli, a stone associated with healing in ancient cultures. But the real shock came when CT scans of the woman's skull revealed something unexpected, evidence of chronic infection around the eye socket. The prosthetic wasn't merely cosmetic. It may have served a medical purpose, shielding damaged tissue or maintaining facial structure as the orbit decayed. Who was she? The grave offers clues. Buried alongside ceremonial vials that once held medicinal herbs and a bronze mirror polished to a reflective sheen, she was clearly a person of status. Some scholars speculate she was a priestess or healer, roles often linked to physical differences in ancient societies. The mirror suggests an intriguing possibility that she used it to position the eye herself, adjusting it like someone today might fit a contact lens. Yet the most haunting detail is the imprint left on the prosthetic's inner surface, a faint texture matching the contours of her atrophied socket, molded by time to her body like a second skin. This artifact shatters assumptions about Bronze Age medicine. Unlike Egyptian or Mesopotamian prosthetics, which were often symbolic additions for the afterlife, the burnt city eye was built for the living. Its existence hints at a society advanced enough to value both function and dignity, where disability didn't mean exclusion but adaptation. Recent experiments by archaeologists using period-appropriate tools show recreating the eye would require not just skill, but collaboration between healers, artisans, and the wearer, a level of care we rarely attribute to antiquity. Perhaps the most poignant question isn't how they made it, but why. In a world without anesthesia or sterile instruments, the effort invested in this small act of compassion speaks volumes. The eye's golden iris, still gleaming after millennia, seems to hold a silent challenge to see the past not as primitive, but as a place where humanity's drive to heal and beautify was already fully formed. When modern ocularists craft prosthetics today using 3D printers and acrylics, they're walking a path first laid by nameless artisans who turned tar and gold into something far more precious, a testament to the timeless desire to be seen, whole and unbroken, just as we are. Rising from the dusty plains of Khuzestan like a stairway to heaven, the Chog Hasanlu ziggurat stands as one of the most enigmatic ruins of the ancient world. This colossal mud brick temple, built by the Elamite king Untashnaparisha around 1250 BCE, wasn't just a place of worship. It was a holy mountain crafted by human hands, its 5 terraced levels symbolizing the cosmic bridge between earth and the divine. Imagine workers hauling thousands of bricks stamped with the king's name, each one carefully baked in kilns fueled by tamarisk wood to withstand the centuries. The ziggurat's heart was a shrine to Inshushinak, the protector god of Susa, but its outer walls held a secret. Over a dozen temples dedicated to lesser deities, a divine retirement home for gods who might otherwise feel neglected. What makes Chog Hasanlu extraordinary isn't just its scale. Though at 53 meters tall, it dwarfed most contemporary structures, but its hydraulic genius. Archaeologists found a network of baked clay pipes feeding a monumental basin, a ritual purification system that channeled water through the complex like lifeblood. The bricks themselves were engineered with bitumen mortar, a glue so effective it still holds firm after 3,000 years of scorching summers and flash floods. And then there's the Gate of the Gods, a ceremonial doorway where priests once performed rites so secret, their details died with the last Elamite scribe. The faintest traces of blue and green glaze on surviving bricks hint at a facade that once shimmered like a mirage across the plains, visible for miles to pilgrims approaching with offerings. But the greatest mystery isn't how Chog Hasanlu was built, it's why construction abruptly stopped. The upper terrace was never finished, its bricks left stacked in neat piles as if the workers simply walked away one day. Some scholars blame the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, whose invasion in 646 BC left Susa in ruins. Others point to a more subtle culprit, shifting religious priorities as Elamite rulers began favoring new gods, leaving half-built ziggurats as monuments to fading faith. The most tantalizing clue, a handful of tablets found on-site mentioning a curse that drove workers to flee. Were they spooked by omens, or was this a cover for political unrest? The ziggurat's isolation adds to the puzzle. Unlike most major temples, Chog Hasanlu wasn't built in a city center but in open countryside, a 3-day march from Susa. Was this a sacred retreat or a vanity project by a king desperate to leave his mark beyond his capital's shadow? modern LiDAR scans reveal something astonishing. The ziggurat sits at the center of concentric circular walls, a design echoing Mesopotamian cosmic diagrams where temples represented the axis of the world. Perhaps Untashnaparisha wasn't just building a temple, he was trying to reshape reality itself, aligning earthly power with celestial order. Walking the ruins today, you can still see fingerprints in the bricks, marks left by laborers who never imagined their work would outlast empires. The stairways, worn smooth by millennia of wind, climb toward nothingness, their intended summit forever unrealized. Yet in its incompleteness, Chog Hasanlu speaks louder than any finished monument. It's a frozen moment of ambition interrupted, a reminder that even the mightiest kings answer to time. The gods may have abandoned it, but the stones still whisper their stories to anyone willing to listen. Discovered in the fertile valleys of Jilan, where the Alborz Mountains slope down to meet the Caspian Sea, the Amlash figurines look like characters from an ancient comic strip, pot-bellied men with noses like crescent moons, women sporting headdresses shaped like rolling waves, and animals so stylized they verge on abstract art. These clay creations, dating back to the early Iron Age, defy easy categorization. Some stand barely taller than a thumb, their surfaces pinched and smoothed by fingers that worked the clay while it was still soft, leaving behind fingerprints that linger like secret signatures. Others are hollow, with tiny holes that whistle when wind passes through, suggesting they were more than just silent statues. What were they for? Theories collide like actors in a play where no one has the full script. The simplest explanation is toys. Archaeologists have found similar figures in children's graves, their worn edges hinting at small hands that might have clutched them during play. But here's the twist: many were excavated near hearths and household shrines, nestled beside cooking pots and burnt animal bones. This placement suggests a ritual role, perhaps as votive offerings to ensure healthy harvests or protect newborns. One particularly haunting figure, a woman cradling an infant with an oversized head, was found buried beneath the threshold of a home, a clear charm against evil spirits. The exaggeration of features, from swollen bellies to elongated necks, might have been intentional distortions to amplify their magical power, like visual prayers molded in clay. Then there's the satire angle. Look closely at a group of musicians, their drums and flutes rendered in comic disproportion, and it's hard not to see humor frozen in time. Were these ancient Persians poking fun at village chiefs or bumbling priests? Some scholars compare them to Greek theatrical masks or even Mesopotamian caricatures, where exaggerated traits marked social commentary. A figurine of a man with a beard curled like a fern frond could be a riff on vanity, while another with arms raised in a dramatic pose might mock self-important orators. Without written records, we're left decoding body language across millennia, searching for winks in the clay. The craftsmanship reveals another layer. Unlike the regimented art of empires, Amlash pieces burst with regional flair. Local clays, rich in mica, give them a glittering texture, while the paint recipes ochre for rust red, charcoal for black were tailored to withstand firing in open pits rather than kilns. This wasn't mass production. Each figure has quirks like a lopsided grin or a deliberately asymmetrical eye, celebrating imperfection in a way that feels startlingly modern. Perhaps the boldest theory comes from the figurines' postures. Many sit cross-legged, a position associated with storytellers in later Persian culture. Could these have been teaching aids used to act out folktales or moral lessons? Or maybe their ancestors' simplified portraits meant to keep the dead close at hand? One thing's certain, their survival is a miracle. Most were found in fragments, painstakingly reassembled like three-dimensional puzzles, each crack holding a whisper of the lives that shaped them. Today, these figures sit in museum cases, their grins and grimaces facing glass instead of hearthlight. But in their exaggerated curves and whimsical flaws, we catch glimpses of a people who knew that clay could carry laughter, devotion, and memory, all rolled into one small, enduring shape. Hidden beneath the vaults of a Tabriz mosque, a bundle of forgotten fabric fragments holds whispers of a wonder that once dazzled emperors, the legendary spring of Khosrow carpet. These tattered remnants, rescued from oblivion in the 1950s, aren't just scraps of wool and silk. They're puzzled pieces from what historians believe might be the sister carpet to Khosrow's mythical masterpiece, a tapestry so lavish it was said to be woven with threads of gold, silver, and actual gemstones. The original, described by Arab historians as the size of a palace courtyard, depicted lush gardens so vivid that courtiers allegedly mistook its embroidered blossoms for real flowers in winter. But when you study these Tabriz fragments up close, something extraordinary emerges: tiny loops of shimmering metallic thread still clinging to the weave, and flecks of what might once have been crushed lapis lazuli embedded in the knots. The craftsmanship alone rewrites what we thought possible for ancient textiles. Each square inch holds over 500 hand-tied knots, twice the density of most medieval carpets, with stitch patterns so precise they suggest a system of magnification lost to time. Some threads retain traces of saffron yellow and cochineal red, dyes so expensive they were reserved for royalty, but the real revelation lies in the design. Unlike typical Persian floral motifs, these fragments show intricate geometric channels that mirror historical descriptions of the spring carpet's irrigation patterns, a woven celebration of Khosrow's hydraulic engineering feats. One triangular scrap even preserves half of what appears to be a peacock, its tail feathers rendered in a gradient of indigo that shifts hue when viewed from different angles, a technique modern weavers still can't fully replicate. Surviving miniature carpets from the same era offer tantalizing clues. A knee-sized prayer rug in Vienna's Hofburg Palace shares the same unusual knot mathematics, where the number of stitches per row corresponds to astrological cycles. Another, housed in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, has silver threads tarnished black except beneath its ruby-studded border, proof that gemstone embellishment wasn't just poetic exaggeration. These smaller cousins may hold the key to reconstructing the lost giant's grandeur, yet the greatest mystery isn't how such a carpet was made, but how it vanished. Some claim it was cut into pieces as war booty when Arab forces sacked Ctesiphon in 637, its fragments scattered like seeds across empires. Others insist it was burned for its precious metals during a siege. The Tabriz fragments, with their scorch marks and uneven cuts, support both theories. But perhaps the most poignant detail is this: in their frayed edges, you can still see where someone tried to repair them with ordinary thread, as if unwilling to let the magic die. These tatters remind us that even the mightiest artifacts are just stories woven in fiber, and some stories refuse to unravel, no matter how many centuries pass. Tucked away in a quiet corner of the British Museum's Persian collection lies a small silver disc that hums with spiritual energy, the Spentameniu amulet, a Zoroastrian artifact so charged with meaning, it was likely worn close to the heart as both armor and prayer. Cast in high-relief silver during the height of the Sassanian Empire, this palm-sized charm depicts Spentameniu, the Holy Spirit of Zoroastrianism, embodied as a radiant figure with flames erupting from his shoulders and one hand raised in blessing. But this wasn't just decorative jewelry. The amulet's reverse side hides a labyrinth of microscopic Avestan script sacred verses from the Yasna hymns, etched so finely they're barely visible to the naked eye. These weren't mere decorations, they were a divine shield compressing the power of ritual into portable protection. Wearing this amulet was an act of daily defiance against chaos. Sassanian Zoroastrians believed evil forces lurked everywhere, from spoiled food to whispered gossip. The amulet's silver wasn't chosen just for its luster. It was thought to repel impurity, its cold surface symbolizing the unyielding nature of cosmic order. Historical texts describe priests anointing such objects with sacred hayama juice before tying them around necks with 3 strands of white wool, a nod to Zoroastrianism's triad of good thoughts, good words, good deeds. But the real magic lay in its dual function. By day, it served as a spiritual filter, its inscribed verses like Yasna 43, "Through your brightness keep far from us the lie." Acting as a mantra in metal, by night, owners likely placed it near oil lamps, allowing the flickering light to animate the relief, making Spenta Mainu's flame-cloaked figure seem to breathe, a private light show reinforcing faith's victory over darkness. Recent multispectral imaging revealed something astonishing: traces of mercury sulfide in the grooves of the script. This wasn't accidental. Alchemists of the era believed mercury carried purifying properties, and its crimson hue, when combined with sulfur, mirrored the dawn light so sacred in Zoroastrian morning prayers. Some scholars argue the amulet's circular shape wasn't arbitrary either. It mirrored the sun discs held by Faravahar carvings, creating a microcosm of the universe where Spenta Mainu's radiating flames mirrored the sun's life-giving energy. Even its weight mattered. At precisely 12 drachms, it matched the symbolic value of a perfect sacrifice in Zoroastrian liturgy, 1 silver coin per month of the year, distilled into a single devotional object. But the amulet's most ingenious feature might be its sound. When suspended from its original silk cord, fragments of which were found clinging to the loop, it emitted a faint chime with movement, a sonic ward against silence, which Zoroastrians associated with Ahriman's influence. This wasn't superstition, it was psychoacoustics avant la lettre. The same principle shapes modern sound therapy, where certain frequencies are used to reduce anxiety. For a Sassanian merchant navigating the bustle of Ctesiphan's markets or a child fearing night terrors, that soft ring was a tangible reminder: divinity travels with you. What's heartbreaking is how few survive. Most were melted down during the Islamic conquests, their silver repurposed while their sacred inscriptions were erased. That this one endured, likely buried beneath a home's threshold in what's now Fars province, feels like a minor miracle. Today, it whispers across centuries, a testament to a time when faith wasn't just felt, but worn, heard, and held, a whole theology folded into something small enough to fit in your palm. Nestled in the rolling foothills of Bushehr province, where the wind carries the scent of salt from the nearby Persian Gulf, the Gur-e-Doctor tomb stands as a curious echo of imperial grandeur on a modest scale. This compact stone structure, barely 6 meters tall, looks like a scaled-down replica of Cyrus the Great's monumental tomb at Pasargadae. Same slanted roof, same single-chamber design, even the same distinctive gabled entrance. But where Cyrus' mausoleum was built to astonish, this tomb feels almost intimate, as if meant for someone who mattered deeply to a select few rather than an empire. Local legends have filled the silence left by history, insisting this was the resting place of Mandona, Cyrus' mother, a princess of the Medes who supposedly died in this region. The story tugs at the heart, a son's tribute to the woman who gave him life, rendered in the same architectural language as his own eternal monument. But archaeologists raise an eyebrow at the tale. The tomb's construction style points to a later date, likely the early Achaemenid period after Cyrus' death. The masonry lacks the precision of Pasargadae, with rougher joins and irregular stone sizing, suggesting it was built by local craftsmen emulating, not copying, the imperial style. So who lies within? The most compelling theory points to a regional governor or noble, someone important enough to merit a royal adjacent tomb but not significant enough for historical records. The tomb's location near ancient trade routes strengthens this idea. It may have marked the grave of a key administrator who kept the empire's coastal commerce flowing. Excavations in the 1960s revealed no human remains, only fragments of alabaster vessels, offerings looted or decayed long ago. What's truly fascinating, though, is how the tomb's simplicity speaks volumes. Unlike the grand inscriptions at Naksh-e-Rustam or the elaborate reliefs of Persepolis, Gur-e-Doctor bears no text, no carvings, no hints beyond its shape. That absence is itself a clue. In borrowing Cyrus' design without his fanfare, the builder made a quiet statement. Loyalty to the crown didn't require ostentation. The tomb's weathered stones, still standing after 2.5 millennia, suggest they chose well. Then there's the landscape's role. While Cyrus' tomb dominates an open plain, visible for miles, Ger-e-Doctor tucks itself into a hillside, half hidden until you're nearly upon it. This wasn't just practical, it was poetic. In Persian tradition, mountains were sacred spaces, bridges between earth and heaven. Placing the tomb here, where rock meets sky, might have been a deliberate nod to Zoroastrian beliefs about the soul's ascent. The contrast is striking. Cyrus' monument declares his glory to the world, while Ger-e-Doctor whispers its occupants' worth to the wind and stars. Modern tools have uncovered another layer of mystery. Ground-penetrating radar reveals anomalies beneath the tomb, not burial chambers, but what might be foundation trenches for a larger, unfinished complex. Was this meant to be the centerpiece of a memorial site that never materialized? Or did the builder run out of time, leaving the tomb as a solitary sentinel? The stones won't say, but they endure, a testament to how even the mightiest empires leave behind not just grand narratives, but small, stubborn enigmas that refuse to be solved. Standing like a fortress of solitude along the ancient Silk Road, the Behistun caravanserai isn't just a building, it's a guestbook of empires. Built in the 17th century under Shah Abbas's eye, this sprawling sandstone complex once offered shelter to caravans of exhausted merchants, their camels laden with spices from India, porcelain from China, and Venetian glass destined for Persian palaces. Step inside its towering walls today and time collapses. The real magic isn't in the architecture, though its vaulted arcades and central courtyard are masterpieces of Safavid engineering, but in the layers upon layers of graffiti etched into every available surface. These aren't random scratches, they're autographs of history, left by travelers separated by centuries but united by the same dusty road. Take a closer look at the Eastern Gateway. Here, a Mughal diplomat from Akbar's court carved his name in elegant Nastaliq script alongside the date 1598, likely pausing on his way to negotiate an alliance against the Ottomans. Just a few feet away, a Dutch East India Company agent scrawled his initials in clumsy Latin letters during the spice trade boom of the 1600s, his knife marks overlapping with Persian poetry praising the caravanserai's sweet well water. The walls tell stories of chants, encounters, a Tibetan monk's Buddhist mantra etched beside an Armenian merchant's cross, their paths crossing for one night before vanishing into the deserts of memory. The caravanserai's design reveals its role as a cultural blender. Notice how the stables were deliberately placed downwind to spare delicate merchant noses, while the upstairs sleeping chambers featured tiny windows angled to catch breezes but block sandstorms. The central courtyard's acoustics amplify whispers, a security measure to eavesdrop on potential thieves, or perhaps to facilitate multilingual haggling under the stars. Kitchen excavations uncovered cumin from Egypt and saffron from Kashmir in the same hearth, proof that while empires rose and fell, the hunger for good food united everyone. But the most haunting graffiti lurks in the servants' quarters. Beneath crude sketches of camels and date palms, someone carved a single word: tired. No date, no name, just the universal sigh of a human being far from home. Nearby, archaeologists found a child's footprint pressed into a drying brick, forever memorializing a moment of play amid the grueling Silk Road grind. These humble marks hit harder than any royal inscription. They remind us that history isn't just made by kings and treaties, but by the calloused hands and aching feet of ordinary people who kept the world connected, one weary step at a time. Today, restoration teams use UV photography to reveal graffiti hidden under centuries of soot and plaster. Each new discovery adds another voice to the chorus: a Greek physician's medicinal recipe here, a Georgian queen's complaint about lumpy pillows there. The caravanserai stands as a testament to hospitality as diplomacy, where rival empires checked their swords at the door and shared bread instead. Its walls don't just preserve history, they prove that even in an age of caravans and caravanserais, the most enduring cargo wasn't silk or silver, but the stories we scratch into stone when we think no one's watching. Glowing like fragments of a medieval sky, the Hajj Agha Ole Kashi tiles are more than just decoration, they're a manifesto in cobalt and clay. Discovered in the shrines and mosques of Kashan, these 15th century masterpieces have a luminosity that defies time, their deep blues swirling with geometric patterns so precise they seem drawn by celestial hands. But what makes them truly astonishing isn't just their beauty, it's the fact that modern potters still can't replicate their exact hue despite centuries of trying. The secret lies in a lost alchemy of chemistry and devotion, where artisans transformed ground quartz copper oxide and a mysterious ingredient called lajvad into a color that outshone even Venetian glass. Reverse engineering these tiles is like cracking a medieval patent. X-ray fluorescence scans reveal traces of gold in the glaze, not for opulence, but as a catalyst that stabilized the blue during firing. The clay itself was kneaded with goat hair for elasticity, then left to age in underground cellars for years, allowing natural fermentation to remove impurities. But the real magic happened in the kilns. Unlike European ceramics fired at steady temperatures, Persian masters used a technique called flame flicking, where they abruptly altered kiln oxygen levels to create microscopic crystals in the glaze. These crystals refract light like prisms, giving the tiles their signature depth, a trick modern labs only partially understand. The designs hold their own riddles. Some motifs repeat with mathematical perfection across vast tile panels, yet no measuring tools from the era could achieve such precision. A single mislaid tile would ruin the entire pattern, suggesting artisans worked from memory or used grids now lost to history. Even more intriguing are the hidden messages. Under UV light, certain tiles reveal faint Quranic verses in their glaze, visible only when sunlight hit at dawn during the summer solstice, a divine reveal for early worshippers. Yet for all their technical genius, these tiles nearly vanished. When Kashan's workshops declined in the 18th century, the recipes died with their masters. Today, conservators painstakingly piece together fragments like archaeologists reassembling an extinct language. One breakthrough came when a chemist noticed traces of pomegranate rind in the glaze, a tannic acid that bonded the pigments. Another clue emerged from an unexpected source, a 13th century poet's passing mention of the blue that drinks moonlight, hinting at a lunar-inspired firing schedule. What's truly humbling is how these tiles redefine luxury. In an age before synthetic dyes, their color was more valuable than gold. Tamerlane reportedly traded captured prisoners for crates of Kashan tiles to adorn his Samarkand palaces. But their greatest legacy might be their fragility. Unlike stone monuments, ceramic survives only when cherished. Every intact tile is a testament to centuries of hands that cleaned without scratching, wars that spared the walls they adorned, and sunlight that warmed but never faded them. In their cobalt depths, we see not just a lost art, but a covenant between beauty and time, one we're still learning to read. Carved into a weathered limestone slab near the grand ruins of Persepolis, the Kadamga stone bears a single, haunting marker, a shallow indentation resembling a human footprint, worn smooth by centuries of reverent touches. But is this the actual imprint of a Achaemenid king's sandal, pressed into the rock during some long-forgotten coronation ritual, or is it the symbolic footprint of a god, left behind as a tangible connection between heaven and earth? The debate has raged since European travelers first documented the site in the 1700s, with even modern archaeologists divided. Those who argue for a royal connection point to the stone's proximity to Persepolis, a strategic placement where monarchs might have paused during processions to symbolically leave their mark on the empire. The footprint size, significantly larger than an average human foot, could suggest a ruler's divine stature, a common trope in ancient Near Eastern iconography where kings blurred the line between mortal and celestial. Yet the alternative theory holds deeper spiritual weight. In Zoroastrian tradition, certain rocks and springs were believed to be touched by divine energy, and the Kadamga's placement overlooking a natural water source strengthens this interpretation. The footprint's orientation facing toward the sunrise aligns with ancient Persian solar worship, possibly linking it to Mithra, the sun god associated with covenants and sacred oaths. Even the name Kadamga hints at pilgrimage. It translates to place of the footstep in Persian, evoking sites like Jerusalem's Dome of the Rock or Buddhist shrines where sacred footprints anchor the faithful to transcendent moments. What's undeniable is the stone's enduring power. Today, visitors still press their lips to the hollow, a practice that has deepened the depression over time. Local lore claims the touch cures ailments, while others whisper that it carries the weight of ancient promises. Some say those who kiss it inherit the strength of kings or the protection of gods. Archaeologists have noted something curious. The stone's surface shows tool marks inconsistent with natural erosion, suggesting human enhancement, yet the exact era of its creation remains unclear. Was it carved during the Achaemenid period or later by Sassanian rulers eager to connect themselves to a glorified past? The most compelling clue might lie in the absence of other markers. Unlike royal inscriptions at Naksh-e-Rustam or Behistun, the Kadamga bears no text, no accompanying reliefs, just that solitary impression. This silence feels intentional, as if the creators wanted the ambiguity itself to be the point. In a land where history and myth have always danced closely, perhaps the footprint's true purpose was to serve as a blank slate, a place where each generation could project its own beliefs. Whether it's the ghost of a king's stride or a god's fleeting touch, the stone's power lies in its mystery, wearing away slowly under the weight of countless kisses, each one a silent prayer to stories older than memory. In the heart of Isfahan, where the golden domes of Safavid Persia gleam under the desert sun, two unassuming minarets guard a secret that defies physics, the shaking minarets of the monarch Jonban Mausoleum. At first glance, they look like any 14th century Islamic towers, their turquoise-tiled facades whispering sacred verses in geometric script. But give one a gentle push and the impossible happens. Both minarets shudder in perfect unison, swaying like reeds in a breeze while the central structure between them remains eerily still. It's an architectural paradox that's baffled engineers for centuries. How could medieval builders, without computers or precision tools, create structures that transfer vibration so flawlessly across stone and mortar? The secret lies in a symphony of hidden design choices. Peer inside the minarets and you'll find hollow shafts with interior staircases spiraling upward, not just for access but as tuned resonance chambers. The bricks are laid in a distinctive herringbone pattern, allowing flexibility absent in rigid, grid-like masonry. Crucially, the minarets share a foundation and are connected by a wooden beam hidden beneath the roof, creating a seesaw effect where energy from one transfers seamlessly to the other. Modern seismologists comparing these movements to pendulum dynamics note how the oscillation frequency, exactly one back and forth swing per second, mirrors the resting human heartbeat, a detail too precise to be coincidence. Some argue this was an accidental byproduct of earthquake-resistant construction, a trial-and-error solution to surviving the region's tremors, but the minaret's placement at a Sufi mystic's tomb hints at deeper intent. Sufi meditation practices often involve rhythmic rocking to induce trance states, and historical accounts describe dervishes gathering here to chant dhikr prayers while the towers swayed around them. Imagine the sensory immersion, the minaret's vibrations traveling through the ground, synchronizing with the chanters' swaying bodies, the very architecture amplifying their spiritual ecstasy. The tower's 16 sides, An unusual choice may encode mystical numerology, as 16 is revered in some Sufi traditions for symbolizing the stages of divine love. Yet the minarets refused to give up all their mysteries. When British engineer Robert Murdoch Smith tested them in 1877, he noted an anomaly. The shaking only works when initiated from the north minaret. Push the south tower and the effect weakens dramatically, a quirk still unexplained. Conservationists today face a dilemma. Every shake risks micro-fractures in the aging brickwork, yet restricting access severs a living link to medieval Persia's fusion of science and spirit. The minarets stand as a testament to a time when architecture wasn't just about shelter or show. It was an instrument for transcending the ordinary, one resonant tremor at a time. From golden rhytons whispering of long-lost banquets to the humble fingerprints pressed into bureaucratic clay tablets, each of these 30 artifacts is a fragment in the grand mosaic of ancient Persia. We've traveled through empires, decoding the language of glazed bricks and the silent boasts of cliffside inscriptions. We've held the weight of a prosthetic eye that outshone time, and traced the shivering minarets that still dance to an architect's forgotten rhythm. Together, they reveal a civilization that refused to be just one thing: conquerors who championed human rights, engineers who bent seismic forces to their will, artists who turned battle armor into theater. Think of these artifacts as keys not just to palaces and tombs, but to the minds of people who laughed, bartered, worshipped, and wondered under the same sun we do. The Cyrus Cylinder and the Salt Men, the Oxus Treasure and the Shaking Towers each contradicts the stereotype of ancient Persia as merely a kingdom of opulence and war. They show us the scribes who tallied beer rations, the mothers who buried figurines with their children, the miners who clutched walnuts in the dark. History isn't just written in declarations, it's etched in the calluses of everyday hands, so now it's your turn. Which artifact pulled you deeper into Persia's mystery? Was it the carpet woven with gemstones that tricked the eye, or the defiant apron that became a revolutionary flag? The tomb that scaled down an emperor's grandeur, or the amulet that held an entire theology in its silver curves? Drop your favorite in the comments. I'd love to hear which piece of this puzzle sparked your curiosity. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into the shadows of history, hit that subscribe button. There are countless more stories waiting in the dust, and trust me, we've only just scratched the surface. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, the past is never as distant